All right, everybody. How is everybody doing today? I am Jamie Cheese Slice. I'm the engineer and producer for the show. If you might notice, we have a little bit of a different layout because we have changed the name of the show from Left on Left, and it is now called Uncontrolled Opposition. So today we've got a nice couple of guests for you today. We've got Peter Osborne and Danny Sheehan, Esquire, and they're going to talk about the Netflix documentary American Conspiracies, The Octopus Murders. And they're going to explain to you what the real truth is behind that story of this documentary that won an Emmy. So we're going to debunk it all, and we're going to get to that right now. But first, let me bring on our host, Gloria Guillo and Jeremy Kuzmarov. How you guys doing?
Hey, Jamie.
You ready for today's show? I know you are. And here's our guests, Danny and Peter. So let's get to this because we got a good hour we got to fill. And after that hour, I'll come back on and then we'll wrap up the show. All right, guys?
Sounds great.
Let's do it.
Hey, everyone. Welcome to Uncontrolled Opposition, where we battle together mind wars with truth strikes. No, you haven't misdialed. We were formerly Left on Left. More about that later. I'm Gloria Guillo, a former administrator in New York City government, an investigative journalist, and vice chair at WBAI Radio, and a co-founder of Green Renaissance Sovereign Rights Movement. I'm joined here today by a resident expert, Jeremy Kuzmarov. Jeremy is a professor at Tulsa Community College, a historian, an investigative journalist, and managing editor of Covert Action Magazine, an online magazine that focuses on CIA and deep state activity. Our producer and engineer is Jamie Cheeseslice. The opinions you hear are ours and that of our guests, not those of WBAI, the Pacifica Foundation, or the Progressive Radio Network. This content is intended for informational and educational purposes only and should not be interpreted as professional or legal advice. Listeners are encouraged to form their own opinions. Well, we changed our show's name because we listened to our audience, and they said there is no left or right anymore. We agree. Our lives are now defined by the axiom, it's us against them. Regular people against oligarchs. Full stop. Since we talk a lot on our show about controlled opposition, because we find deep state infiltrators in all political parties and in nearly all affinity groups, we agreed uncontrolled opposition was a more fitting name for all of us. Together, we will form a united resistance, an inclusive peace movement. We refuse to fight each other with hyped divisions and identity politics. Consider that the deep state is an equal opportunity killing machine. It will use its private army, paid for with our tax dollars, to murder not only those it blatantly calls useless eaters, like us, and anyone who stands in its way, but also those it determines are no longer helpful. As we've discussed on our shows many times, even CIA directors get whacked. Today's show is about uncovering the true story of the Octopus Murders, a so-called investigative documentary that recently won an Emmy Award. Spoiler alert, what you hear today is purely about truth and justice. We hope you find, as we do, that labels like conservative and liberal are ideologically irrelevant when drugs, weapons, organized crime, politicians, and the CIA are all working together against us. Malcolm X told us the only difference between the two is that one is like a wolf and the other like a fox. Both show their teeth before killing, but the former snarls and the latter smiles. Today's guests take no ideological prisoners, and as such, their story presents the perfect opportunity to debut our new name and logo. Our distinguished guests include Peter Osborne, Australian physicist, political researcher, and whistleblower, and his colleague and attorney, Daniel P. Sheehan, constitutional and public interest attorney, legal activist, educator, and author. Some of the notable cases he has been involved in are the Pentagon Papers, Karen Silkwood, and Iran-Contra. Before we get into the meat of the Octopus Murders, let's first outline the relationship between the intelligence community and Hollywood. Through the CIA's Office of Public Affairs and its entertainment industry liaison, the CIA has for decades worked directly with producers, directors, and studios to shape how intelligence activities are portrayed in the media. The purpose goes beyond technical accuracy and access. It is narrative management, controlling how covert power is imagined by the public. The focus became more intense after the 1970s Church and Pike committees brought the CIA legal, immoral, and unconstitutional activities into public scrutiny. According to FOIA releases, the Pentagon and CIA together influenced more than 1,800 films and television scripts just between 1911 and 2017 alone. Films like Zero Doc 30, Argo, Homeland, and Jack Ryan notoriously present sanitized versions of intelligence work, emphasizing courage, moral complexity, and necessity while minimizing systemic failures, blowback, and illegal operations. But narrative control is not just about glorifying the intelligence community, it is also about neutralizing dissenting or dangerous counter narratives. Netflix, The Octopus Murders, serves as a case in point. Marketed as an investigative documentary, the series covers the suspicious death of journalist Danny Casolaro in 1991. Casolaro was investigating what he termed the Octopus, a hidden network linking intelligence agencies, defense contractors, and organized crime across multiple covert operations. Just as he was coming to profound conclusions, he was found dead in a hotel bathtub with multiple slashes in his wrists. After telling family and colleagues that if he was found dead, it would not be a suicide. Yet rather than challenging the official narrative, the Octopus Murders functions as controlled narrative reinforcement. It casts Casolaro as a troubled, obsessive. It repackages the suicide explanation. It subtly undermines the credibility of whistleblowers who sought to expose links between intelligence agencies, surveillance software, arms trafficking, and organized crime. In effect, the series closes the case for the public while appearing to open it. Entertainment products like the Octopus Murders all operate within the same ecosystem. They deliver pre approved versions of history and current events that uphold institutional legitimacy while sidelining deeper inquiry. The challenge here is not merely to resist overt propaganda, but to expose and decode these more sophisticated forms of narrative control. And there are no two people better to do that than Peter and Danny. Gentlemen, please tell us about yourselves, how you got mixed up in the Octopus Murders, why this film fails the rigor of what should be deemed an investigative documentary, and how the Emmy Award it receives is horribly misplaced. Thank you.
Go ahead, take it, Peter.
Okay. Well, thank you, Gloria, for inviting us onto your show. And I commend your show and Covert Action. It seems like the platforms for getting the truth out to the public are very limited. Main
Okay, we seem to be having some technical difficulties. We've lost Peter. Peter's coming to us from Australia. Danny, can you fill in until we get Peter back on?
Sure. Let me take it. Yeah. Oh, there's Peter. I think he's back.
Yeah, it seems like someone's cutting down a link here.
Go ahead, Peter.
So Danny and I had met, and I'll put the point. I was going through the research notes of Danny Casolaro. I'll go back to how I started this, but I found the contact and telephone numbers of Danny Sheehan that he had been contacting him. So I picked up the phone and introduced myself to Daniel Sheehan, asking if he ever spoke to Danny Casolaro. And he said, yes, I actually spoke to them the week before. And I said, Danny, I've got all of his research notes and he's got a copy of all your investigations on the octopus, particularly a very big document, which is interviews you've done with Joseph Calso, and also the octopus murders relating to BCCI and also to the Promis software being sold to the Australian government. And at that point, we're talking. That was sort of at the middle of an investigation that had started back in 2001. A investigative journalist, a veteran reporter by the name of Marshall Wilson, had been reporting about me launching a federal standing committee of privileges investigating that I was a threatened protected witness to Parliament, which is a criminal offence. And the company doing that was a research company owned by Rupert Murdoch.
Okay, it seems like somebody's interfering with Peter's feed. So, Danny, you want to take over a little bit?
Let me take it. So here's the bottom line: is that I was at the United States Jesuit headquarters as their general counsel in their social ministry office for a decade, and it was there that I began a major investigation of the off-the-shelf enterprise that later became the Iran-Contra scandal. And that's how I ended up talking with Denny Casolaro a number of times. And Peter, as he's back now, but Peter discovered in looking through the notes of Denny Casolaro that Danny had been talking with me about the interface between my investigation of the off-the-shelf enterprise that was kind of popularly, ultimately understood to be run by Oliver North, and the investigation that Denny Casolaro was engaged in. So that's how we both met. So Peter's back, and he can pick it up from there.
Yeah,
Okay.
and then, Peter, if you could just kind of be brief, because we want to get into the thrust of the film and what it misses. So just give a brief background.
Yes, no worries. So the veteran reporter, his name is Marshall Wilson, wanted to investigate a $6 million check that had been sent by Dr. Earl Bryan, Hadron Inc., Richard Babian across to Alan Bond, the winner of the America Cup, to Prime Minister Robert Hawke. And it was payment for allowing Iran-Contra arms going through Australia and the sale of the Promis software to the Australian government. He asked me if I knew about...
The viewers may not be familiar with the Promis software. Can you just summarize that in a sentence or two? This was specialized computer software developed by Bill Hamilton, an NSA official, that was stolen by the CIA to enhance their money laundering and arms trafficking and surveillance operations.
That's correct. Stolen from Bill Hamilton, president of Insular Inc. I said to Marshall, I know nothing about this, but tell me about it. And he said it was stolen. It's sold to Australia to spy on the Australian government and intelligence agencies as backdoor. And could you look into this for me? So I started to do some research for 4 weeks, came back, and I said, I think I know the company that did this. It's Rupert Murdoch's company that's been threatening me as a witness right now. I'm in Parliament and they're doing an investigation. So I called for the first time in January 2001, Bill Hamilton, and introduced myself. And I asked him a very simple question. I said, Bill, do you know a company by the name of Computer Power Group? And Bill says, I'm in shock. No one's ever asked me that. How do you know them? I said, well, I'm in Parliament. I've been threatened by them as a protected witness, and I worked for them in 1992 and 94, and I'm the whistleblower exposing massive R&D tax fraud. They're the worst offender. And in 1995, I got appointed as the science advisor to Honourable John Howard's Liberal Party, and I shut down $2 billion of tax frauds. And there's a legal paper written about me by the leading attorney to the Senate. After witnessing it, he called it when ethics fails and groupthink prevails, the cover-up of all this fraud. And I was thanked by the Federal Treasurer personally for saving over $4 billion of taxpayer funds because it was corrupt. It was wealthy individuals and international banks ripping off our taxpayers, and it was shut down. And he said, Peter, the president, 2 presidents of Computer Power Group, Roger Allen and Ted Prince, flew to Boston in 1982 and met me requesting to become the distributor for the Promis software. And I said, this is unbelievable, because I said, I've got all their annual reports. I work for them. And their largest client in the US is James Baker, the Secretary of State, Secretary of Treasury, and also one of the chief advisors to Ronald Reagan. And I said, did you know that that company was owned by Rupert Murdoch? And he said, no, I've never been told that. And he said, they took the software tapes, They said that they couldn't sell one copy of it, and they dumped me in 1984, and I've never heard from them ever again. I said, well, that's not true. I said, they developed Austrac, which is the Swift banking tracking software in Australia for all banks, credit cards, using artificial intelligence with their partner Stanford Research Institute. And it's the same team that developed FinCEN in the USA. And I said their expertise is the development of the COBOL compiler and artificial intelligence. And he said that's the smart Promis software that he'd been tipped off about. Now, this is an unbelievable story because I knew nothing about Wackenhut. I knew nothing about any of this going on, but it's the only company who can do that. So I testified in Parliament in 2001 that this company has destroyed my career, has shut me down, is threatening me as a witness again, and it's a criminal offence. The findings of the committee state Peter Osborne and his family had been destroyed unfairly, but there's no financial avenue for the federal government to compensate me because it involves state governments, which isn't under their jurisdiction at the time. Now, from that
Peter,
point,
maybe I could just cut you off. So if I can just summarize your story, yeah, so we can get into the film, because I think for our viewers, just so you know, Peter had developed his own software. Peter is a science genius and had developed software of his own to assist the Australian government and potentially other governments as far as medical system, online medical system, and people can access medical files and see doctors in remote areas through the internet. And this is in the late 90s. So these systems, were really advanced in the COVID period. But Peter had developed this system in the 1990s, and he had his company because he had certain encryption keys that the CIA wanted, and they also had their own uses for his software. Just to kind of simplify, they also took control of his companies illegally and personally threatened him. And this led him into his investigations. And he amassed a massive amount of evidence working with Daniel Sheehan. So, Peter, is that right? Because now we can get into the film. Your assessment.
Yeah.
And then we'll get into some of the more evidence you have that the film doesn't present. But hopefully that gives just a basic storyline for our viewers, and we can discuss some of these. We only have 1 hour, so
Okay.
If that's accurate, then Peter, maybe we can get the assessment first from Peter and then from Daniel Sheehan, who interviewed the producers. What is wrong with this film, and how does it fit with Gloria's model of these Hollywood movies that cover up for the CIA and defame whistleblowers?
Okay. So just to wrap it, there's a copy of my Australian passport.
Okay, Peter has a loose connection, so we'll start with you, Danny. So now we know kind of some of the backstory of how the two of you were investigating this for years and know the inside story. And then we have this Netflix documentary that reaches so many people. What is wrong with it in your assessment? Okay, let's start with Danny.
The bottom line, Jeremy, is that what Peter in his research and the research that Danny Casolaro, who was murdered in 1991, that they were investigating this extraordinary criminal syndicate that was operating worldwide by the highest levels of CIA and NSA and other types of major American-based and Western civilization intelligence agencies. The leadership of them were working together developed into a major criminal operation where they were spying on everybody, spying on all the citizens. They had tapped into the Swift banking system to be monitoring everybody's transactions. And what they were doing is under the guise of attempting to fight communism and national security on the part of the United States and Australia and in England, what they were doing is actually engaging in a massive criminal operation where they were smuggling drugs around the world, laundering drug money, and in fact, shipping illegally seized gold all around the world. And this was the operation that Danny Casolaro was investigating. And because he was investigating it, he was murdered. And what's happened here is Peter and Danny Casolaro, and to some lesser degree myself, had developed all of this extraordinary evidence about what this criminal syndicate was that was operating. And the fact is, these two young documentary producers grabbed onto this story and basically presented a documentary which gave a completely false impression to the outside world that somehow Danny Casolaro really hadn't figured this out, that he became totally frustrated and committed suicide by basically cutting the tendons in both of his arms and bleeding to death in a tub, out where he'd gone into West Virginia to meet with important sources to his investigation, including the IRS office, where he gathered box loads from them of documents proving the particular conspiracy that he was asserting. And he ends up being murdered in his hotel room. And the bottom line is these two young, comparatively inexperienced investigative journalists
Danny,
ended up doing a story, distorting the entire story.
Danny, could you go into a little bit more besides how many cuts he had on his arms, what other injuries he had? I mean, it seemed like a tremendous amount of injuries for one to inflict upon themselves. And I
also
think
didn't
Peter had an
eyewitness
interesting story.
Saw somebody entering the room before.
Yes, that's right. There's witnesses from the motel that saw a stranger go into his room right at the time that he was found dead later. But he had massive slashes in both of his forearms above his wrist, cutting the tendons actually in both of his arms. So that the cutting of his tendons in one of the arms would have made that hand completely useless to cut the tendons in his other arm. And when I confronted the Zachary, the director of the documentary film, the American Conspiracy, the Octopus Murders, I asked him, I said, look, isn't it perfectly obvious that Danny Casolaro was murdered? There was no way that he could possibly have slashed the tendons in both of his arms, and I said, how would you propose he even did that? And he said, well, he could have cut all the tendons in one of his arms and was bleeding out, and then taken the razor and put it in his teeth and cut the tendons in his other arm. I told him I thought that was the most ridiculous story I'd ever heard. And he said to me, look, frankly, I don't give a shit whether he actually committed suicide or not, or was murdered. I just thought it was a really good story. And so that he had decided he was going to pitch this story as this kind of ambivalent, confusing type of investigation that basically frustrated Danny Casolaro. So he committed suicide, in this preposterous manner. And that I was stunned when I saw the documentary because I was so familiar with the evidence behind the whole thing. I was hoping that the guys were going to reveal to the world this major criminal operation that was being run by the leadership of the major intelligence agencies in the Western civilization, all working together to help enrich themselves. I mean, they were all dipping into these funds that were going around the world. In the BCCI in Pakistan, the Nugan Bank in Australia. These are banks that Peter Osborne got access to the kind of classified files of these banks and spent years tracking what these people were doing that transparently was criminal. And that he had showed this evidence to Christian and Zachary. He had explained it all to them, and they went ahead and consciously distorted this. And they attacked Peter and Michael Riconosciuto, another one of the major witnesses that had access to this evidence, and they smeared them basically in this documentary. And then at the end said, oh, well, nobody can really tell whether Casolaro committed suicide or not. It was preposterous because they were in possession of direct, detailed evidence that had been given to them by Peter Osborne, and they basically told a lie to obfuscate the entire investigation, and had the functional effect of covering up of what the crimes really were that were involved. Not only the murder of Casolaro, but the massive set of crimes that these intelligence officers were in fact perpetrating. And and for this, they ended up getting the Emmy Award for the best documentary film. It's basically a disgrace, and therefore Netflix, which put this on, owes a deep responsibility to Peter Osborne and Michael Riconosciuto and others to have some kind of a follow-up on this documentary to explain what the real story was. Now they're not potentially legally obligated to do that, but from an ethical point of view of responsible journalists, they have this intense moral obligation to share this additional information with the rest of the world. And we intend to do that.
Okay, well, can you follow that up? You intend to do that by developing your own series?
That's right. That's right.
Mm-hmm.
What we're going to be doing is establishing a genuinely public interest organization, not designed to have general profits for anybody on this thing, but to do the all important journalist investigation of the information and set it forth. Not to spend all of our time basically dumping on Christian and Zachary, although they deserve it, but to actually get the story out, the actual story of the murder of Danny Casolaro, and very importantly, what it was that he was investigating to prove that this major criminal operation was functioning at the highest levels of the intelligence community, basically being driven by the United States Central Intelligence Agency, working with Rupert Murdoch, who was an asset for the American Central Intelligence Agency. This is a story that hasn't been told yet, and we intend to get this told. Now, I just a quick background here. I'm the one that at the Harvard Civil Rights Law Review actually initiated the United States Supreme Court case that established the right of journalists to protect their confidential news sources, and also was one of the legal counsel for the New York Times in the Pentagon Papers case, revealing the deep secrets that were contained in all of those documents. And this was after years of the Central Intelligence Agency telling lies about the Vietnam War and doing exactly what it was that Gloria was talking about at the beginning of the show. This complete deception of the American people, running these propaganda operations through the major news media in the United States. That's what this documentary film that was done by Zachary and Christian, it is a piece of propaganda, and it has to be offset. And we need to do it from the point of view of a public interest operation to show that this is not being motivated by trying to generate profits for anybody. We're talking about doing this through a public interest organization, which we've run for 40 years. This done the stories about the Karen Silkwood case, the Iran-Contra case. We've exposed these criminal syndicates in the past, and we intend to do it again.
Very good. And if I can add to that, there's a website in Australia called Australians for Murdoch Royal Commission. It has the signatories of 500,000 Australian citizens. It's a campaign to protect all investigative journalists from being threatened for revealing the truth. It's endorsed and supported by 2 Australian Prime Ministers, Honourable Malcolm Turnbull, who I've communicated with and know, and he was from the Liberal Party, and also Honourable Kevin Rudd from the Labor Party, when Murdoch's empire lobbied to have them removed because they don't toe his line. And this is available for people to visit. Next week, I'm going to table, I've personally interviewed Robert Parry, a very experienced and credible investigative journalist. Him and I are talking about his evidence against Rupert Murdoch. I provide my evidence on the Promis software sold to the Australian government to spy on every Australian citizen. We had a parliamentary inquiry called the Lean software investigation, proving that it was illegally in breach of the federal legislation for privacy and confidentiality. It linked every record of Australian citizens, their bank accounts, their health records, their land titles, their court cases, the federal and state police records, intelligence agencies, back to Pine Gap.
Well,
Pine Gap. And
Peter, one thing I think we just need to point of clarification for our audience is, can you explain the concept of a backdoor and how the Promis software had one, and how the CIA, by selling this to all different governments, maintained this access? Okay, I think
we lost
we
Peter, so
lost
maybe
Peter again.
Okay.
maybe Daniel can answer, and then
Daniel,
I have
can you
another
fill in?
question. Oh, no, Peter's back.
Okay.
great.
In 2004, I wrote to Michael Riconosciuto for the first time in prison. Him and I have been writing together for all the years up to 2018 when he was released. In fact, it's my testimony that the judge allowed him to be released, allowed him to walk out of court. The US government was trying to lock him up for another 13 years.
We lost
Yeah.
Peter.
So the bottom line here is that what is at the core of the investigation that was conducted by Peter and Danny Casolaro was the fact that there was a piece of software that was able to store and sort through intelligence information that was stolen by the United States government. And that what they did is they put what they call a backdoor into this. They provided this software for the intelligence agencies of all of the Western major powers, and for the SWIFT banking system, et cetera. But it had a spy device built into the software, so that this other group, this criminal group, could wiretap basically all of the communications that were going on, all the information that was being stored in the Promis software, and they were utilizing their access to this information to conduct criminal operations, in part to enrich themselves. And I mean, we're talking about billions of dollars that they were embezzling through this process. This is a federal criminal racketeering enterprise, not unlike the enterprise that Oliver North and Richard Secord and the people got caught doing. This was on steroids. And this Promis software was sort of at the core of it, that was being utilized by them to spy on all the private citizens, all of the private citizens around the country, and in all the countries of the Western powers. And they gave it to law enforcement agencies, and they gave it to other intelligence agencies, and were spying on the other intelligence agencies around the world in their own allies. That's what this Promis software was really all about. And that's the back door, they call it, or trap door, that was built into the Promis software by Michael Riconosciuto.
That's correct. And can I just step in? Michael Riconosciuto is as smart as Einstein. And I can say that. I'm a physicist mathematician.
We keep losing him. Well,
the bottom line is that Christian and Zachary both consciously trashed not only Peter Osborne, but trashed Michael Riconosciuto, where all they had to do was spend the time understanding what the information was that they were providing to them, and they didn't. They just skimmed through the top of it and had this surface story. And that's why this fellow, Zachary, the director, said, basically his quote was, "I don't give a shit, whether this is true or not. I just want to put it together to show a nice story." And it was better to leave it kind of ambiguous as to whether he was murdered or whether he wasn't, because it makes for a better story, and he actually said that directly to us.
I'll jump in. My link is dropping down every couple of minutes. I do podcasts every day. I never have a link going down. So if I keep dropping out, let me say the following. I can prove that Michael Riconosciuto is a genius. It's my testimony that got him out. I am a physicist mathematician. I represented the encryption technologies developed by NSA and CIA. I had the exclusivity of it. Passport is recorded at the NSA Research Center. I am credible. Michael is credible. It is a sophisticated backdoor. It's got not just software, it's hardware. It's the design of the computers. It uses a special device called a Bragg cell channel analyzer. Bragg stands for Sir William and Lawrence Bragg diffraction, famous physicists who lived in Australia. I was educated by the fathers of diffraction physics in X-ray and electron diffraction. I lived at Max Planck Institute in Berlin in 1982 on a scholarship. I'm the only person who can talk to Michael because I know how the devices work. Second, what's very important, Michael, I have the research and the legal evidence. I have all the contracts of CIA with Hadron Inc., with Wang Labs, who are the partners of Computer Power Group, and I have the resume of the research director for Wang Labs, who developed the Swift banking networks in Belgium and Virginia, and he was flown across to Australia to work with Rupert Murdoch's company in '82 when Bill got his tapes. I have the proof that it's in the Swift banking at Citibank. I can prove there's $6 trillion of money laundering. I had the legal evidence when I presented it to United Nations. It's a CIA operation called Project Hammer, Operation Still Point. And Michael Riconosciuto has spoken openly to me on all areas because I don't stop him. I know what he's talking about. And he had working for him. He was running Hercules Research. It was going to become the next Silicon Valley of United States for his investment.
Okay, we've lost Peter. If I can make a few points, then I'll ask a question to Danny. A few points just about Michael Riconosciuto for the viewers is that he was set up. He was working for the CIA to modify the Promis software, doing all these. Peter's back. Okay, I just wanted to point out, Peter, that the audience may not be aware that then they set him up on these phony drug charges. Because he knew too much about these operations, and put him in prison. And then this film, videos as he gets out of prison, but kind of ridicules him instead of listening to his insights. So go ahead, Peter, and then I'll ask another question when you're done.
I'm going to keep dropping out, which is obvious that they don't want me speaking. The fact is that working for Michael Riconosciuto, who is running her, is Admiral Rankin, who oversaw the testing of the hydrogen bomb. Working for him was William Goodell, who set up DARPA and the Phoenix Project in Vietnam. Those two people are working under Michael, for Michael, and I have all the patents and research to prove it. More importantly, I know what he did with the modification, how it works. What's really important is he's a whistleblower. He knows too much. Now, I'm going to tell you categorically, in 2016, Cherie Seymour, the author of The Circle, contacted me telling me how credible I am, and my co-author at the time for our book is actually a veteran reporter.
Okay, we lost Peter. Well, I have a question for Danny. As far as the film, because the film makes it seem that Casolaro kind of hit a dead end in his investigation, and that's what led him to depression. Yeah. But I mean, I know from my research and working with you guys that actually he had made some major breakthroughs. He had gotten these checks from BCCI regarding the Iran-Contra. He was going to give to the Kerry Commission. He was going to be going to Australia to work with a commission that had been set up to investigate the Nubitan Bank, which was a bank the CIA had set up for laundering funds, some from the drug traffic in Southeast Asia. So my question is, can you maybe just say what are some of the major revelations you think Casolaro had, and how is that wrongfully presented in that film?
Well, for example, you just touched upon, Jeremy, the key to one of the keys to understanding the criminal conspiracy that's at the heart of what was covered up is this Nubitan Bank down in Australia, where Peter is. That this was a bank that was set up by Theodore Shackley, who was the CIA station chief in Saigon, who was a partner in a major drug smuggling operation, opium smuggling operation that was going on in Southeast Asia, which all kinds of people heard about, flying the drugs out in Air America There are movies that have been made about this. But Theodore Shackley helped set up this bank in Australia, the Nugan Bank, and he was taking his share of the opium trafficking money that he was getting and putting it into the bank, and they were using it to fund operations like the Phoenix program, which was a massive political assassination program that was functioning in Southeast Asia that killed at least 20,000 non-combatant civilians who weren't adequately loyal to the right-wing South Vietnamese government. That this is the depth of the corruption that these people were engaged in needs to be exposed. There have been pieces of it that have surfaced at Air America and the drug smuggling, the criminal banks like the BCCI bank that collapsed and had all kinds of CIA drug money in it. And what's happening is that, as Gloria pointed out at the top of the show, that there's an aggressive campaign that is being financed by the Central Intelligence Agency to distort and deceive the American people about these criminal operations. What Danny Casolaro was doing, he had tapped into the information that made it perfectly clear to any audience what this criminal operation was. And it is true that Michael Riconosciuto knows so much and is so smart and can remember the names and dates and times of everybody as Peter can, that when they tell the story, that a lot of people can't follow it because they can't remember, more than 5 or 6 or 7 different names. And so what's happened is the Christian and Zachary have taken advantage of that fact, and they've not only reduced the story down to a simple-minded story, but it's completely incorrect. In that they've pawned this off on the world as this kind of interesting story about this mysterious death of Danny Casolaro, and they end up basically suggesting that it was probably a suicide, when it's absolutely transparent that it wasn't a suicide. It was a murder, and they pass off his investigation of this extraordinarily important criminal syndicate going on, like, who can tell what they were really doing? It's just like in the Iran-Contra thing, that we at the Institute at that time proved beyond any doubt that what they were doing in Iran-Contra is they were criminally smuggling weapons to the Contras in complete violation of a prohibition by Congress. And the CIA got involved in it and actually provided to the Senate a representative from the CIA to explain it to them, a man by the name of Tom Polgar, who completely deceived them. And so the Congress said, "Oh, it was so complex, the Iran-Contra thing, we couldn't really figure out what was going on." But the fact of the matter is, 13 of the highest level officials in the Reagan-Bush administration were criminally indicted for what they were doing by the special prosecutor, Lawrence Walsh. And so the CIA then turned around and tried to smear him, to the point where he eventually just ended up backing out of the whole case. This is an extraordinarily important story for the people of the United States, the people of Australia, and the people of all of the Western allies to understand that their major intelligence agencies have been penetrated and compromised by a criminal syndicate that is in the members of which are enriching themselves by spying on all the private citizens, spying on the banking system, using the spied information to do insider trading to enrich themselves. This is a story that has not only not been told yet, but has been completely covered up by this particular documentary. And now they've succeeded in getting the Emmy Award for the best documentary, which is going to compound the difficulty in getting the truth told. But we're devoted to getting the truth told, and we're going to do that. And that's what the basic news story is here.
Yes.
That we're not only going to have what is a, quote, follow-up to this American conspiracy, we're going to tell the truth about it and give all the details, which are completely convincing to any good faith audience.
Absolutely. Gloria, do you have a question? I have a couple things, but
Go ahead, Jeremy.
okay. Well, one thing, yeah, I mean, I think you hit on it, that this is really also a central, story to U.S. foreign policy in the post-war era, and that this started with maybe you can say something. I think Casolaro was on to the theft of the crime started in part with the theft of the Yamashita gold out of Japan.
Yes.
And this is a story that kind of, in a way, takes us from 1945 to the present day. And as you say, how the intelligence agencies have become corrupted, infiltrated by organized crime, and been able to hijack U.S. foreign policy with huge implication, as far as all these destructive wars that are being waged across the globe, all the taxpayer money, the manipulation of public opinion. So maybe you can just add to what you're saying as far as the relevance of this story to a general understanding of U.S. foreign policy since World War II and the corruption we see today.
Okay, the bottom line is that there are several sort of integral stories that get revealed by this particular conspiracy. One of which is right at the end of World War II, the Japanese imperial government, because they knew that they were losing the war and knew that the United States was getting set to invade Japan to end the war, they secretly moved out of Japan and buried in the Philippines, 176 separate troves of treasure that they had gathered during leading up to World War II by sending a special unit of the Japanese army all throughout Asia in raiding and stealing gold and silver and platinum and jewels. And they hid this treasure in the Philippines. And what happened is at the very end of World War II, the head of U.S. Army intelligence in Manila, Edward Lansdale, knew that they had hidden this gold and treasure in the Philippines. And what he did is he captured the driver of the Japanese general that had buried all of this, and had him tortured, and found at least 12 of these troves, of the 176 different troves. And they pulled out of there $1.2 trillion in gold, in platinum, in silver, in big 50-gallon drums of diamonds and rubies and sapphires. And they stole this treasure, and they put it into a bank in Switzerland. And they used it as a basis for generating gold certificates, which they used to fund covert operations throughout Europe at the end of World War II, specifically targeted to keeping any of the partisans who had fought the Nazis all through Europe, to keep them from being elected into public office, because they viewed them as not adequately loyal to the Western capitalist system. They thought that they were kind of socialist. And so what they did is they actually used this money covertly to fund the campaigns of former Nazis and supporters of fascism. This is so vile, what it is that was done, and that the use of this $1.2 trillion has poisoned the entire American intelligence system right at its very roots. In the setting up of the Central Intelligence Agency in 1947 by the National Security Act of 1947, they've been using that criminally pilfered gold and drug money, the massive smuggling of opium out of Southeast Asia, by the Central Intelligence Agency, run directly through Cuba. When Batista was the dictator down there, there was a man by the name of Paul Helliwell, who was a partner of Batista, the criminal fascist governor, dictator of Cuba, before Fidel Castro overthrew him. They were smuggling opium through and heroin through the Cuban island into the United States, and it was being coordinated by the Central Intelligence Agency itself. They said Paul Helliwell, who was the partner in the criminal syndicate, was a full-time Central Intelligence Agency employee. That the depth of the criminality of the Central Intelligence Agency, in that not only in the assassinations of innocent people, the smuggling of heroin around the world, but the active deception of the American people by mounting full-scale lying campaigns to the American people and I will point out, knocking off United States senators, kicking them out of office, in funding campaigns against them. This is an extraordinarily criminal operation, which here at this particular point in time in history has to be publicly revealed. We've got to purge ourselves in Western civilization of this criminal syndicate if we're going to have responsible democratic government.
Yep.
There was a couple of other suicides. There was a journalist, Gary Webb, and he allegedly suicided himself by shooting himself in the head twice.
Yes, that's true.
Let our audience wrap their mind around that one.
And we were in regular our institute, the Christic Institute, which is now the successor of which is going to be doing this major new set of documentary films about the real story. We were in regular communication with Gary Webb, who was writing these stories for the San Jose Mercury News. And I was in communication with Danny Casolaro because we were all investigating this same criminal syndicate. And what we've got to do is we've got to respond to the fact that the CIA and the directors and producers of this documentary that won the Emmy Award for the best documentary, because it is put this front and center now in the American consciousness, it provides an extraordinarily important opportunity for us to tell the real story.
Tell the truth. That's correct. Can I jump in here? I have the legal evidence that 4 directors of Nugenhan Bank in Australia in the Cayman Islands were directors of BCCI right up to the end. Danny Casolaro had to sign BCCI checks for the tow missiles. That evidence was in the Martinsburg police records. Can I tell you that? Second,
and the tow missiles were for the Iran, illegal Iran Contra.
4 days before Danny Casolaro's murdered, Dwayne Claridge, Richard Secord, Oliver North, Robert Gates, and others involved with the cover-up of the tow missile deal were indicted for lying to the Iran-Contra hearings by Lawrence Walsh. Danny Casolaro had with those checks all the bank accounts, transactions, signed checks with Adnan Khashoggi, Corbynafar. That evidence was in the Martinsburg police. One page confirms it. Second, he also had the IRS records on all the people involved with the airlines funded by CIA with Ted Shackley, Thomas Kleins, and the Mafia.
And Peter, I want to add one point about the film. They actually kind of give the suspected assassin is this guy Joseph Cuellar, correct, Daniel?
Yes, that's right.
He worked for the CIA, but the film, I think, interviewed his son and gave a flattering portrait of Joseph Cuellar, like he was just this nice guy. And yet we have very strong evidence, and including a witness sketch from the Martinsburg police files that looks almost identical to Joseph Cuellar. And we have other evidence that makes him the primary suspect. And yet this film gives this flattering portrait of him, this CIA assassin. And Cuellar we can link to the CIA. So I just wanted to point that out.
Well, it's the key to this is that the degree to which that documentary film distorted the truth gives rise to a serious suspicion that there's a lot more going on there than just simple incompetence on the part of the director and producer of that movie or that documentary. That this thing is systematically covering up the real investigation and systematically trashing the real witnesses that have the direct information, and ultimately trashing Danny Casolaro, who gave his life to try to prepare this information to get it to the people of the world, And so that has fingerprints on it of intentionality, that needs to be investigated to ascertain whether or not this is just simple incompetence and irresponsibility on the part of primarily Zachary, the director of the thing, who told me that he didn't give a shit whether Casolaro was murdered or not. That he was just trying to do a good story, and to leave it in an ambiguous way was a better story,
Yes.
So that's at least gross incompetence on his part and irresponsibility, but there's their fingerprints all over this as being something potentially even worse.
Can I add to that my website, the 6i, is endorsed by the son of Danny Casolaro, Ben Mason, the best friend of Danny, who saw the BCCI checks put on the floor and the transactions before he went to Martinsburg to meet with the source. Second, also, I've got all my interviews with Wendy Weaver, the longest girlfriend. She has told me categorically, Richard Secord was calling Danny at home all the time. She took the telephone calls.
In Richard
Okay.
Secord, Richard Secord, as you'll remember, was one of the principal criminal defendants in the major enterprise, the Iran-Contra off-the-shelf enterprise. Richard Secord was one of the principal defendants, criminal defendants there. And that's important because this is this investigation that Danny Casolaro was conducting answers the questions that Congress pretended they couldn't figure out in their investigation of the Iran-Contra off-the-shelf enterprise in the sale of TOW missiles to the Iranian Hezbollah. This is the answer.
We have to close out the show. We can continue on other channels, but our radio show is 1 hour. So I would just like to say, can you just quickly let our audience know how they can follow your important work?
Yes, they can go to the Romero Institute, ROMERO, RomeroInstitute.org, and can ascertain a lot of this stuff. And they can also go to Peter's. Peter has a whole series of podcasts that Jeremy can give you the sites to that.
Okay.
And it's 6i.org.
Okay.
6i.org. SEYE. SIXEYE.org. 6i.org.
We were asked to do a disclaimer at the end of our show as well as the beginning, I guess because of our content. So let me do that now. The opinions you hear are ours and that of our guests, not those of WBAI, the Pacifica Foundation, or the Progressive Radio Network. That wraps up our show for today. This is Uncontrolled Opposition. I'm Gloria Guillo, joined here by Professor Jeremy Kuzmarov. Remember to like and share our broadcast. Your kind support keeps us going. Thanks for tuning in. Hope to see you next week. Okay, we can still talk.
Okay,
and you can finish all your thoughts.
We don't want to keep you too much longer, so.
But
if you have any other points you briefly want to make, go ahead.
Next week, I'm putting on my website the letters from Rupert Murdoch and telephone calls to Michael McManus, who was on the board of FIDCO with George Pender, Robert Mayhew, and Robert Booth Nichols, promising that Ronald Reagan can use all of his media outlets in the US, Australia, and UK to heap praise and positive support for every policy and program of Ronald Reagan. What's important about this is 1982, when Murdoch's company got the Promis software tapes. Michael McManus and FIDCO board were testified in court by Michael Riconosciuto is a criminal organization, a CIA NSC front. It was trafficking all the drugs from Lebanon across to Australia and the US through Nugan Bank. And I think that when people see this, that was given to me by Robert Parry.
Well, one thing I just want to make clear is we are still broadcasting live. We're just not on the radio. So anything you say now is going out live.
Good on
you.
Well, I want the world to know, because while we're doing this, I've had 20 shutdowns of my broadband link. I do podcasts every day. I never go down. But the truth is the following. In 2004, Gordon Savell, a veteran journalist and TV producer.
Oh, I think we lost Peter again. So Well, we want to thank you guys. I think we'll maybe
look,
do a
I
follow-up
interrupted.
show in another month or two, and yeah, we'll be in touch regarding your TV series, and
Great.
we definitely like
Great.
to work with you guys. So
Yes.
Also, I
Good.
interrupted Daniel, so I'd like to give him a chance to finish what he wanted to say after Peter.
Well, what I would point out is that another major aspect of the story is going to be revealing criminal activity on the part of Rupert Murdoch. That that many of these people have gotten out of criminal liability when they've died. In the Congress of the United States has let them get out of life alive, basically, and never convicted them of these things. Rupert, this is a thing that has the potential of bringing Rupert Murdoch down, before he gets out of life. So that's an important thing for people to understand. This is about Rupert Murdoch, as well as George Bush Sr.
Yes.
And James Baker, and
Yes.
some of these other major people who should not be allowed to go into history as good people who were basically criminals.
Yes. And two Prime Ministers of Australia, as I said, called for the Royal Commission, signed by 500,000 citizens. We still want it. We want him dragged in and questioned. We have evidence that he actually was buying the documents that brought down Gough Whitlam, the democratically elected politician, with Michael Hand from the Nugan Bank, and Robert Booth Nichols, who is all over Danny Casolaro for the 4 weeks before he dies. His alibi is that he calls and gives his condolences to everybody about the death of Danny Casolaro from his apartment at 5 Half Moon Street in Mayfair. That is significant. That is the apartment owned by Robert Booth Nichols, where Rupert Murdoch visited to buy all the damning CIA documents that we use as evidence to bring down the Whitlam government. It's on his license to carry a concealed machine gun. It's in the FBI reports. That's his alibi. It goes back to 1975. That
and this for
Robert
the
Booth Nichols.
viewers, that was
Let
a
me
coup.
let me
Peter, oh, go ahead, Peter.
No,
I just
no,
wanted
let
to
me, because
explain what
my
the
link
coup was.
goes down. My link goes down every second. Let me
Okay.
finish. Robert Booth Nichols came to Australia in 2004, contacted the SBS Dateline program, where I revealed that I had the evidence that goes to one of the directors, the executive director of CIA. His name is A.B. Krongard. He is running a $6 trillion bank account for the criminal octopus at Citibank. I have the legal evidence. I presented it to the United Nations. It's using the Promis Swift banking software.
Okay, we've lost Peter. I just wanted to explain that was a coup against
They're
the
really
left-leaning.
messing with him
Yeah,
today.
I think Danny made a good point that the CIA was after any movement or regime government that didn't want to be an adjunct to the global capitalist system, wanted a more independent economy for their country. They were called socialist, communist, and often overthrown by the CIA. And the CIA coordinated a coup against Gough Whitlam, who was an independent Australian leader who had criticized the Vietnam War and was threatening these bases that the CIA had in the U.S. military in Australia. And they used a dirty tricks campaign against him and coup. And these were the kind of operations that were funded with the black money, going back to the Yamashita gold, and that the Promis software enabled easier, money laundering to fund these kind of black criminal operations that ultimately destroyed democracy. Related to Danny's points, that this is how we've lost our democracy here in the United States and in so many countries around the world.
I'm going to add to it the two Prime Ministers of Australia who called for the Royal Commission have described Rupert Murdoch as a cancer on democracy. America has the same problem with their boards over there with Fox News. I know more about all the directors on that than anyone else here, is that you are still having the same problem. Bottom line is, Danny Casolaro was coming to Australia. He had the evidence, everything. He was on his way, and I can prove it when you watch the first 15 podcasts, but watch podcast 48 to 54. You will see Christian Hansen
Okay, we may have to wrap it up. Is there anything else?
No, I just think it's important to understand that that our institute that is going to be producing these documentary films coming up has been successful in the past. We're the ones that filed the major criminal charges against the off-the-shelf enterprise of Iran-Contra that generated the major public hearings. You know, I was one of the lawyers that during the Watergate burglary that helped represent James McCord, who is the one who blew the whistle on the White House plumbers unit, and Richard Nixon that ended up bringing him down. You know, that we have a track record of having proven the accusations that we've made, and that we're in the process of getting ready to do it again. And this has to do with this criminal enterprise that Danny Casolaro characterized as the octopus, but it is a wide-ranging criminal racketeering enterprise that was designed by the leadership of the Central Intelligence Agency, working in cahoots with Rupert Murdoch down in Australia. And that this has to be revealed before all of these people get out of life alive.
I'm agreeing. And Danny Casolaro had all the evidence. He was coming to Australia. When you watch podcast 1 to 15, that was the legal evidence that I gave Christian Hansen and Zachary at their request. They solicited it. It's my recorded interviews with key witnesses, including Jack Blum, who was the lead investigator for BCCI. He says categorically, when I'm telling him and reading out the checks, the transactions, he was worried where I got it from and said if Danny Casolaro had that in CIA territory in Virginia, what did he expect would happen? Now, I can tell you categorically, it includes the interviews with Danny's last girlfriend. The Martinsburg police, FBI had her number.
Well, I think at this
Well,
point we should
I know
really
what Peter's going to say because
go
I've
ahead.
talked to him so many times is that they brought her to the Watergate Hotel. They paid her to spend the weekend with the Kuwaiti royal family to get her away from Casolaro. That was all part of the scheme. And yeah, he had all the goods related to Iran-Contra. Oh, go ahead. You're back, Peter.
In 2018, I have all my communications with the Deputy Police Commissioner of Martinsburg Police, who was the key investigator, the one that did the official investigation into the death, and his attorney, offering my legal evidence. I'm writing to them, telling them that I have recordings of 3 witnesses that Danny called on the last day, telling them he had picked up all the boxes of documents from IRS and that he's got everything he needs. He'll contact them first thing Monday when he gets back. He wasn't depressed, he was excited. That evidence was given to Martinsburg police and the attorneys. And what sickens me is this. On the Netflix series, that same attorney is calling Christian Hansen, telling him, oh, we'll let you have the box of evidence that you can put on the Netflix series. We know for a fact we applied under Access for Freedom of Information in 2004. We have the
Can you fill in, Jeremy or Danny?
Yeah. Well, the bottom line is that the Martinsburg police were just totally intimidated by finding this guy in a bathtub full of blood with the tendons in both of his arms cut. You know, in the fact that even though there were 4 witnesses that were attempting to provide the information to them, identifying who the people were that Danny Casolaro was seen with, you know, in the couple days before he was murdered. And a direct witness who saw the person, this fellow Joseph Coyer, you know, going into Danny Casolaro's hotel room, and they were so frightened by the potential implications of all of this, they just said, "Look, this is way above our pay grade. You know, we're not going to get involved in this. We're simply going to close the case," and that they've gone out of their way to try to avoid having it revealed that they didn't only botch this particular investigation. What they did is they participated in covering it up because they were intimidated by the scope of the investigation that Danny was doing and the importance of the people that he was developing evidence against. And so they just took a dive on this case. And that's going to be shown in the new documentary series.
I just have one more question. I recall reading that that they found that he had an injection in the back of his neck with a ethyl alcohol and absolute. Can either of you gentlemen comment on that?
I can only say that I've got recorded interviews. That's Gordon Savell and I with key people who were talking to Danny. They told us that's how it was done. I don't know about the police having that evidence, but can I say the following? We were blocked in 2004 for our access for information. I was blocked in providing evidence of recorded interviews and documents that I can prove that Danny had it, and the witness that we knew was in the box. In 2024, they handed across willingly to these kids to do a defamation, malicious defamation of all the sources that Danny actually trusted and had provided credible legal evidence. I now hold every document from the Martinsburg police after contacting them, asking them when was it unsealed, because we were told that it was sealed by the FBI. It was a lie. The only thing we found in the box is not all of our correspondence offering evidence and communications. They've got Christian Hansen's request under FOI in the evidence box with the evidence, with everything we knew was in there, including letters written by the US Department of Justice and Treasury wanting to know if they recovered any more documents that Danny had picked up from IRS. Can you believe that the BCCI check evidence is there, and the evidence that he picked up the box, and a witness saw his car parked at the front of the department, the IRS building, and the last person to see Danny alive says, I had to go to bed, I've got to get up early morning. He says, I left Danny at the bar with an IRS agent sitting next to him. The cover-up is incredible. And Jack Blum has confirmed all the documents and files that Danny Casolaro had in his house were taken by Anne Klink without permission. It's an interference in a justice investigation of a murder. She sat.
Okay, so there's the bottom line. That this all tracks back to the off-the-shelf enterprise Iran-Contra scandal, and revealing the criminal nature of that enterprise, which the special prosecutor Lawrence Walsh was attempting to prosecute, and was being stifled by the CIA, who launched this major attack against him personally. This is a scandal of extraordinary proportions, and it's going to have to be handled in a series of documentary films, and hopefully eventually a major dramatic series unfolding all of this information so that people can understand it. That's the sort of takeaway of the news here, other than just critiquing the Emmy Award winning documentary film. That what we're really getting ready to do is to tell the full truth about this.
I'd like to finish with an email sent to me in 2016 by Cherise Seymour, who collaborated with them to do that production. We told her that we've got the 3,500 pages of Michael's court testimony in 1992. I went through all of it. Everything he said is true. I've proven it beyond doubt with royal commissioners here in Australia and top secret military contracts that he was working on that are still top secret today. She says to me in writing, for the record, I'm 100% convinced Michael Riconosciuto was framed by the DEA. He's a whistleblower and they punished him. I also have the 3,500 pages of court transcripts. I studied them for years and interviewed many of the key witnesses. Yes, I agree that Michael Riconosciuto was framed. And I made that pretty clear in my book. Well, I couldn't find that. I even sent notarized affidavits to Michael's lawyer, Lou Baffardi, years ago, that I was willing to testify in court on his behalf relative to government cover-up of withholding of evidence that took place in Michael Riconosciuto's case.
I'd just like to interject since Peter dropped out. Jeremy, and also Danny, Jeremy and I talk a lot about the CIA and a field manual that they produced on basically how to sabotage organizations and how to sabotage pretty much anything. And one of the ways to do it is you don't put your best people in positions. So I don't really know very much about these filmmakers. To me, it just seemed like they came out of nowhere and that they weren't the most polished of investigative journalists with a long list of accomplishments. So, it's kind of surprising to me and Jeremy how they got this access, how they got this backing, out of nowhere. And, so it seems, that perhaps they didn't want people with any ethics doing this, and they didn't want any people with a history of accomplishments working on
Well,
this. They wanted
what I
two
think I
guys.
should point out is it's really important to keep the focus on the CIA and the criminal enterprise that this is really all about, and what the truth is behind the investigation of Denny Casolaro. And not allow people just to get sidetracked by these kind of horizontal fights between these producers and directors of this documentary film. What we have to do is do the positive story of what this criminal enterprise was really all about, and take advantage of the fact that attention has been drawn to this by the granting of the Emmy Award to a false story, and use that to basically jump to the ability to tell the actual truth. That's the key. That's the basic takeaway of the newsworthiness of this Emmy Award that was unmerited.
And I agree, and I don't think it's going to be done by mainstream media. I think it has to be done by independent, totally independent editors, producers, and distribution channels. Otherwise, we can't educate the public on them hearing the illegal evidence, the witnesses, and make their own decision on what is the truth. Because at the moment, they're not getting it. And Murdoch is a perfect example, offering that he will help Ronald Reagan only have positive praise in every country worldwide, and any prime minister that actually is independent doesn't toe the line, we get him sacked. And that's why we want a royal commission. There is no democracy. There is no chance to have the true people elected who want to tell the truth, expose the truth, because the media is working with the octopus. It's as simple as that.
Yeah, and this is the danger of Rupert Murdoch. It's not just Fox News, which basically everybody realizes is a propaganda outlet, for the national security state, the kind of Western national security state, and that we have to do something about this. We've got to puncture this balloon of the Central Intelligence Agency, setting up these entire networks of setting up these false narratives, and then salting into other places like Netflix and others of these knowingly false narratives. This is a classic example of them, and we have to take advantage of the opportunity that we have now that's been generated by this, totally undeserved Emmy Award, to get the attention of the American people to say, let us tell you the actual story of the murder of Danny Casolaro and the actual story of the criminal syndicate that he was investigating. It goes all the way to the top of the intelligence agencies in our Western civilization. This is what we have to deal with now.
And Danny Casolaro was brilliant. He had it all, and he gave his life. He was assassinated on American soil. That seems to be the evidence in the cover-up. And when you watch podcast 48 to 54, you will see Christian Hansen reading out the written itinerary of Danny Casolaro, and in colors, yellow and green, you'll see him deliberately jump over anything to do with the truth. The legal evidence that he took from my websites, he had the evidence, he could have presented it, but he has deliberately skipped over all the things that that Daniel Sheehan has exposed and knows is true, everything that I know is true, and everything they know that was true. He was coming to Australia to meet the same royal commissioners who I met with in their chambers in 2004. And these kids were born in 1990. I'm working for Murdoch's company with the Promis software in 92 when Michael Riconosciuto's telling all. And there's an Australian documentary on my website. It is the film footage they're using. I know the cameramen and investigators have been working with me all these years. They were in prison interviewing Michael. They were at Inslaw interviewing Bill Hamilton, and Elliot Richardson. It was investigating that the Promis software was sold to the Australian intelligence agencies to spy on us. That's what they're investigating. And I hold the memos from the agents from our intelligence agencies telling Bill Hamilton, yes, we've been sold the bootleg Promis software. We're very upset about it, and we don't trust the people selling it to us. That was given to Bill in 1992. I have that from day one. And what I'm trying to tell you is this is a corrupt process of hiding the truth. There's no excuse for it. And I've written to Reed Hastings and the two CEOs 9 times. All I've asked for is just an apology. It's fake. It's malicious defamation. But more important, just take it down. It's still going today in my country, and everyone telling a lie. We were trying to get a murder investigation reopened. I was working with the attorney of Martinsburg Police, the chief of police who did the investigation, and telling him, I've got all the evidence that you didn't investigate, but I also know all the evidence that I'm talking about. It's in the box. And they handed across to Christian Hansen and blocked us for 20 years. And it turns out there was never any instructions to seal it. Do you know who told me that? Jack Blum. Jack Blum said, what have they told you? I said, the FBI ordered them to seal it. It's in writing. He said, they don't have that authority. It's got to come from the US Department of Justice. So I wrote back. They ignored me from 2018 to 24.
So anyway, gang, there's the story. The rest of the story is coming. We're in the process of putting together the public interest project that's going to be doing the series of documentary films, and ideally a dramatic series laying it out so that everybody will understand what this criminal syndicate looks like and what it is that has happened and who the people were that ran it. That's what's coming.
Well, we're very fortunate to have you gentlemen here today, and we really appreciate it. And anything that we can do to help, and anytime you want to come back, you're welcome. Please
Yeah,
do.
and I just want to extend my appreciation, Daniel and Peter, for the work you guys have been doing. Yeah, we're here to help you guys. So
Terrific. We appreciate it, gang. Thank you so much.
thank you. You guys have a great
Thank
day, and we'll be in touch soon.
See you
Great.
later, guys.
Take
Bye.
care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
All right, that was interesting but frustrating because
Yeah, it was a rough show technically, but I mean,
Yeah,
geez,
I think Daniel
I
was
have the
excellent because
receipts.
he steered the conversation right on point. And when Peter went out, he really got it on point. And so I think his interview was excellent. So, yeah, and that's the thing with Peter. He can talk a
No, he
lot.
was
He gets
Jamie.
off topic.
Jamie.
So
yeah, I just got kicked off.
anyway, I got to run, but I'm glad
Yeah,
we did that show.
great
I'm going to
show.
try and change the Substack to reflect a new name because I want to get this up right away if I can.
Poor Jamie's just dropping out. I just want to also thank Jamie that Jamie got our logo up. I mean, he got
Yeah, it looks great, Gloria. You
he-
did a terrific job this week.
yeah, it is, and I want to also credit Jeremy. Jeremy came up with our name, And I worked on the logo with ChatGPT, and ChatGPT gave me such a hard time. It was just amazing.
I think we're still live, so why
crazy.
don't we
Yeah.
discuss
We're
our
still
plans
live. We're
after?
still
Because
live.
Jamie wants to develop our own YouTube. So anyway, we'll discuss that offline.
Well,
Sure.
yeah, we got to figure that out. But
Okay. Well, great show.
Well,
And
let's
Jamie,
try
I was
and
just thanking
maybe
you on
have a
the air
discussion.
for
Can we
putting it
have a
all
meeting
together.
or a three-way phone call in the next few days? Or
Sure. Sounds good.
sure,
okay, Gloria, you set
probably
that
a
up.
good idea.
Yeah.
I got a
Will
lot of
do.
notes too for this. Is going to be a
Well,
fun
we
one.
had
to edit.
one you got to bleep out. Otherwise,
That's
we're
two.
okay.
There were two.
There was
bleeps.
two bleepers.
But I might be able to cut one because I think he was just repeating himself.
Well,
Okay,
yeah,
good.
when Peter, I think Jamie, like Daniel's comments were really excellent. So if Peter kept, getting
But
cut off, maybe just want to.
Jeremy, you're live right now.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, we'll talk offline.
Thank you.
All right.
That's nuts. Okay, guys.
I'm leaving. Goodbye, everyone. Thank you for watching.
Okay. I'm just going to close the show because I think everybody's left. This is crazy. I've never seen this happen before. But thank you for watching today, and we'll see you next time. Have a good one, and have a happy 4th of July for those of you who are going to go out there and celebrate it. Be careful, and watch out for false flags. See you next week.